So my cousin Josh here just got this nice buck. We are 1 mile from the truck, so we've got some work ahead of us. But I'm going to show you how to save this cape if you're going to mount this. So before we start taking it apart and getting it in our packs, I'm going to split this neck from here in between the ears. And if you look on a deer, they've got a nice like black line down the center of their back, so you kind of want to just stay on that black line. You could do this at the end, but this, by splitting it up now, it's going to make it a little easier when we get down to trying to get the meat off the neck. And then I can keep this incision a lot straighter for a taxidermist when they go to sew it back up. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do before I start working on taking this deer apart is I'm going to mark. My dad's actually a taxidermist, and one of his pet peeves was a customer would come in with a nice trophy and the cape would be cut off to like here. And so if you're going to think about mounting something, you want to make sure you just give yourself plenty of distance, and so give yourself even more than you would think. And one quick way you can do that without just getting hair all over the meat is you can just cut a few reference holes, just a couple little punctures. That you'll be able to see when you get back in there. So I just went maybe 8-10 inches past this joint of the front shoulder. We've got our tarp laid out. We're going to demonstrate a gutless method, kind of modified, that we've kind of perfected over the last few years. So we're going to come up in here. And I like to just kind of pinch the leg between mine. Split the hide straight down. And I'm going to skin it back. When you're skinning the legs, make sure you come a couple inches past this joint, because if you leave the hair on the joint, it's much harder to cut that leg off. I'm also wearing cut-proof gloves and then some latex gloves on top of that to keep the cut-proof gloves clean. Always start being a little more careful when you're right by your leg. Especially with a razor sharp knife like this Avalon knife. So you want to leave all this intact because this is kind of a nice handle for carrying. Don't cut that big tendon off. This is a big bodied deer. Looks like he's been eating well too, all that fat. attempt to do is basically do one half of the deer and then flip it over and do the other half. So now I'm going to kind of come up here and skin up the middle. I'm pulling the hide way away from the gut area, just to try to not puncture in there. And the ribs are right here, so you don't have to go as slow once you get to where the ribs are. So when you're skinning, to try to keep the meat clean, just peel the hide and back away from the meat. Works pretty well. The fewer incisions you make through the skin, the less hair is going to be on the meat. Down. So for the front leg, you have to come in and just come right on the back side of the leg. And clean cut all the way down. I should have actually stopped right there on cutting this for potentially if it's a mount. It's still a straight incision, so they could sew that up. But sorry, Dad, if you see that video and you get mad. And try to cut this straight across. I'm just going to skin the leg out all the way up a little bit past the knee joint. The muscle always sticks to the skin a little bit here, so you can be real careful since we may potentially mount this one. I'll try not to cut holes in the hide, but you can come up against the hide and keep most of that muscle attached to the carcass. Okay, leg is skinned out. If this were a deer that we were not planning on doing any kind of caping, it works well just to split this all the way up, and you can easily skin it back. So it takes a little bit longer if you're potentially going to mount this thing. not only will we most likely not have to get into the gut cavity with this method, we won't have to have a saw to do anything. No saws to cut off the legs, no saws to take apart the joints or anything. Just a knife is all you need. So now I'm going to skin this down to the center of the spine. Okay, I can feel the vertebrae, so now I know I'm halfway through the animal. A little further to go back here. A lot of fat on this little boy. Okay. Next is going to be removing the legs. Okay, so we're going to cut this front leg off. We've chosen to use a different knife, one that's not as good of a knife. That one's razor sharp. You do cut it into the bones a bit. You can, if you just have one knife to kind of preserve this part of the edge, is use the back part to cut these tendons. Bend the joint, look where it bends, and come right to the center of it. You can kind of feel when you cut those tendons. And then put a little arm lock, and then twist. And then there's usually some other tendons to cut through to get it to come off the whole way. There it is. Now I'm going to remove this front leg. The weird thing about a front shoulder is it's not attached with any bones. So you just peel this back, folding it back. You can see there's some cartilage right there. That's the end of the shoulder blade. And then to make these easier to handle, I put a little cut right there to use as a handle. And there's the front leg removed. Alright, I'm going to cut the back leg off now. It's better to cut these off before you take it off of the body, because then you get leverage. So this joint's a little trickier. You want to come and look at the mass of the joint, and there's a little bolt at the top right there. You kind of want to come in the middle of that and just cut straight down. All the way around. And then just put a pressure on your leg like this, push down, and it pops right off. Twist it. You have one or two tendons to cut to clean up. That's it. Alright, so we're going to leave evident the sex on here, but I'm going to do that on the other side. So here I'm going to come down and I'm just going to cut right through the center. And what I'm looking for is to come up into the pelvis area. putting downward pressure on the leg as you peel back. Now I can feel them on the bone. And I'm just going to try to peel the meat right off the bone all the way. So we have this one huge back leg to pack out, not a bunch of little pieces of meat. As you pull back, then you can start looking for this ball joint here. It's kind of got some blood on it, but you can see the cavity where it is right there. Downward pressure, sewing through the joint. Now I'm just going to skin the meat off the bone. And there's a little protrusion of bone right here. It sticks up. You kind of have to feel it with your knife and cut up in and around it. But try not to cut up and ruin all the roasts, potential round steaks that are in this hind quarter. So it's a half moon shape. Now I'm on the pelvis bone. It's shaped like that. So if you just keep following what you feel with your knife edge along the bone, you can get all that meat off. Into the center of the animal. And there's the hind leg, completely removed. All right, we're ready to debone. Buck, he's got a fair amount of meat just even on top of his ribs here, so I'm gonna debone all that. It's good grinding hamburger meat. Stretch that game back out a bit. There's a couple layers of muscle here. When you get down to the ribs, then just run your knife across the ribs. You can remove a fair amount of meat. A lot of hunters don't mess with this, but we like to get quite a bit of this meat off of here. So we'll do a lot of that deboning off the camera right there. I do want to switch to the back straps though. Back straps are where the nice steaks are. And so you feel where the ribs go and how they kind of go back in, and you start feeling muscle. That's where the back straps start, and they go all the way to the center of the spine. So just start peeling down against the ribs with your knife so you still feel ribs, you still feel bone. That way you don't ruin your steaks. And notice how the hide's like this. It's a nice clean layer, where if you're in the bottom of a forest with pine needles everywhere, the hide can keep these steaks clean. Not too big of a deal here with all this snow, but so we've got a big wound right here. It's probably bullets and shrapnel and stuff like that. So when we go to cut these steaks up, we'll throw a few inches away on either side. So they're pretty easy when the ribs are here, but once the ribs stop and you get to these little vertebrae that are about from here to here, it's a little harder. You have to kind of feel for those little vertebrae and stick your knife in there. Always trying to use the bones as a guide for your knife. Take your time on these back straps so you don't butcher them in a whole bunch of little tiny pieces, because they're really good steaks to throw in your grill. Still feeling bones. And then onto the hip bone now. The hip bone, like I said, it's kind of curves like this, and there's a part of it that you can feel right there. And so those steaks come right up to the other side of that. So I like to just take my knife and come right on the inside, other side of that pelvis bone. Take it all the way to the backbone. And then continue to peel them off these vertebrae here. So down the center of the spine, there's kind of like the fattest, the widest part of the vertebrae. And then it goes back, and then they stick up about 2 to 3 inches straight up from the animal. And if you do this right, you can get almost all that meat off of there, even around that bulge in the vertebrae. Okay, so now onto that part I was talking about, how they stick straight up. I'm just running my knife along those bones down to the center of the animal. And here's your nice big slab of backstrap steaks that you can slice up for a great barbecue. Alright, like I said, we'll do a little of this deboning off camera. That's kind of boring. But we'll go ahead and just get all this muscle meat off here. We'll do a little bit on the neck, and then we'll come back at you when we're ready to flip this animal over. Okay, we're going to start on the other side of the animal. Before we flip it though, I'm going to take advantage of the position of this leg and skin this one, just like we did the other side. Right down the inner seam, inside the leg. And on this side I'm going to take a little more care and skin out the evidence of sex and make sure I don't cut it off. We like to leave it attached to one of the hindquarters. And again, be kind of careful when you're skinning in this area. You can see the pressure kind of building up on the inside. It's not a huge deal if you happen to cut in there, but kind of nice if you can prevent it. Skinning a little bit underneath the abdomen here. Okay, so I skinned out all the evidence of sex there. It's still attached. I'll skin this leg a little farther up here. Again, past this joint. Don't leave the skin down there. They also have kind of a smelly scent gland right there that try to not cut into that, and definitely try to get it off your meat. Around this hock and tendon here. kind of just folds over, and it's got enough tension on it, it'll kind of peel, it'll fold back by itself. And again, don't cut that big tendon. It's a really nice handle, especially if you're going to hang it for any reason. Pinching it between my legs. Do just a little skinning right here in the center line, since it's a good angle. Okay, now we can flip them. Okay, we had to switch cameras. Our battery was dying on that other little camcorder, so I'm using a GoPro now.
Cold temperatures zap batteries.
That's for sure. Yesterday was -4 when we were deer hunting. Today was a heat wave of like 17 degrees. Not too bad out now though. Always peeling the hide away from the meat. Don't skin out a section and have the hair flop back over on your clean meat. Here's the abdomen. There's a lot of pressure in there, so I'm going to lift and pull the skin away. I know it's easier to skin a deer when you hoist it up, but I'm not hauling this deer a mile up that freaking hill, all together with the carcass and everything. Okay, ready to do the front leg. Start right on the back, slide straight down. You can kind of see the armpit there. That's where you want to kind of cut, make like a little V shape coming up to here. This is called the brisket of the animal. Skinning up towards that incision I made, peeling the hide away from the front leg. slowing down when you're by your own legs. The knife do the work and don't push it through. Just grab the hide and pull. Okay, now's a good time to go ahead and cut this front leg off. Again, look for the joint. Go right in the center of the joint. Cut, 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 using the back part of my knife so the front part doesn't get completely dulled. Cut as many as you can. Put an arm lock and then twist. And then it's pretty much free at that point, and then come back and clean up cutting some tendons. Alright, and push it back over. And I'm going to cut this back leg off. It's just nice and convenient to cut these off instead of trying to fit them in your backpack sticking out. So look for this big mass for the joint. There's another smaller mass here. You kind of come in right in the middle of that. Cutting the tendons all the way down to the bone. These big bucks are harder to do than a doe or an antelope. Put pressure on your knee. And oh, I didn't get all of them. If that happens, it just, you cut some more tendons. Got it that time. Okay, so flip him completely over. A little bit more skinning to do right here. It's easier to get all the skinning taken care of all the way to the center of the animal before you start cutting that joint off. Got the back leg. Okay, I'm completely through to the other side. Pick this up. Okay, so this is all still attached. Very important. Keep the game wardens happy. So you can see that ball joint from the other leg. That's what I'm looking for on this side, and I'm feeling the bone right here. There's the center line of the bone. So I'm going to come up on that center line. And again, just using the bone surface as my guide. And the pressure of the leg folding back will naturally expose that joint. You can see it right there. It's a little ball. And then you can see that protrusion I was talking about there. So once you get one side, you kind of refer to the other side to see what's coming until you get the hang of how it feels against your knife. Okay, a lot of pressure there, so I'm going to try to be careful, hopefully not cut into that. Now I'm going to follow that half moon shape of that pelvis bone with my knife. And Josh, can you push that front leg so it down just a little bit? There we go. Peeling the meat all off the bone. It's all going to come off in one chunk. There it is. I've already skinned down to where I left off on the other side. It gets a little confusing right here with all these folds of skin, especially kind of on these big bucks. Starting to rut, their necks get kind of big. So kind of try not to cut a bunch of holes that the texture must have to sew up. There's that incision I made for the cape, right? So now that's going to help me when I get to the point of skinning out and deboning the neck. That'll relieve some tension and make it easier. Okay, cut this front shoulder off. Again, there's no bone, just cut straight down, lift. Keep pulling back, and you'll see it. There's that cartilage again. That's how you know you're to the top of it. Try not to cut down into your steaks, which are right there. And perfectly clean front leg. Okay, we'll go and do some more deboning, get all this hamburger meat off of camera. And I'll come back and I'll show you the back strap step on this side too. We'll be back in a bit. Okay, we are going to remove the back straps on this side of the animal now. We kind of deboned a lot of the hamburger meat. We'll do a little bit more off camera, but I do just want to show you. Once you get it to this point, see this muscle group here? That's all the steaks, those really nice back strap steaks. So you just follow the ribs down. And there's also an extra little accessory like muscle right here that you can come. On a bigger animal, you can add that to your steak. Smaller ones, it's better just to use this little chunk that I'm working on right now for grinding meat and clean up your steaks when you go to cut them up with a cutting board. But it's good to get that meat off all in one piece. So I'm following the ribs. And again, we've got the wound up here, so there's probably some shrapnel and some bone fragment. So when we actually cut up and process those steaks, we'll probably throw away from here to here. So I'm peeling it down to the spine. And making sure I got some clean hide here to kind of roll them down onto as I peel them off. So that's the center of the animal, and this is where the bones start going straight up that way. So the ribs end here. Here's where I was talking about the vertebrae. They're only about this long. You can see one sticking out right there, and you can feel them. With your fingers, if you go like that, you can feel them. So you want to come just to the inside of those and follow those down. If you come on the other side, you're going to cut into the gut cavity. Peel it right to the bone. And then here's this hip bone again. You can feel that ridge. Cut some of this fat off so it's easier to see. So I'm going to come just to the inside of that, and I'm going to stick my knife in there and cut those steaks away from that bone. Okay, so now the vertebrae, they have a big ball shape right there. So go right around those ball areas, but don't cut straight up yet. Go around the ball area of the vertebrae, and then you go to the center. See, you get another probably inch of meat if you come around those balls, go in, and then peel it where the vertebrae are sticking straight up. And just peel it to the bone. this one in half just because it's already shot there. When you see this whitish yellowish tendon here, you know you're at the center of the back. That goes all the way up the back of the neck. Okay, I'll put these on the tarp. I'll show you just a little bit of how we try to get a lot of hamburger meat off the neck. There's actually a fair amount, especially on these bigger animals. So I pulled the hide back this way, and I've got that incision I made for the cape right there. So I'm just going to use that to skin out to. Exposing all that nice hamburger meat that's on the neck. And kind of refer back to the animal. You're basically, there's a joint right here that you can kind of feel. That's kind of where you're trying to get to. And like I said before, if you were not saving this animal, if you just split this all the way up to there, it's super easy to peel off. A little tougher when you're saving the cape. Okay, so there's that bone I was showing you that I was feeling. So I know that's basically as far as I need to go. And then the vertebrae, they just kind of come on up. And this is all meat here and around the esophagus and the windpipe. So there's a good chunk of meat right there. And then what I like to do for the neck is kind of imagine the center line, and you can kind of feel those ridges right there, the vertebrae right along there. Feel those little bumps. Take your knife right along those bumps just to the side of them. And then there's just a series of little repeated vertebrae bones that stick out, that if you take your knife, just like we've been doing everything else, and run it right along the bone all the way, you can peel all this out. And again, there's that whitish yellowish tendon, that means that's the middle. When you're cutting this, try not to cut a bunch of holes in your hide, your cape. You can see those little ridges of bones right there now. So now I'm going to come up and over that middle ridge. So now you can see that ridge there is a ridge there. There's a big ridge there. And so that's down to bone pretty much everywhere. There's a couple little tiny pieces of meat. We'll probably get that off. We'll spend a few more minutes off camera getting the last little morsels off. There's the esophagus. But then we'll flip this over now that this is skinned out, and we'll get the meat off the other side of the neck. And then we'll show you one more segment after that about how to get the tenderloins out. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Alright guys, in addition to just a little bit more hamburger meat we're going to get off this, you want to make sure you don't forget to get your tenderloins out. They reside just on the inside underneath the spine right here, kind of by where the kidneys are and stuff. So you can see that little row of vertebrae, bone, 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 come right on the inside of that. As soon as you start cutting into that, you'll see this tenderloin muscle. There, you can see it right there, a nice long, skinny, clean piece of meat. If you do happen to gut the animal, these are even easier to get out, but no need to gut it if you don't have to. And then you can just stick your hand in there and you can get it to be pretty much all released. And then you just need to trim the edges of it. Pretty big tenderloins on this guy. And it's such tender meat, you can almost pull it out without cutting it, but cutting it helps, otherwise you might pull it apart. And there's a nice, good tenderloin for sure. So we'll flip it over off camera, get the other tenderloin out, a little bit more deboning, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to cut the head off with just a knife. Okay, we are going to take the head off. And so to do that, you're looking for the main neck joint. And so since we've split this cape back here, I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to skin this back a little ways. And there's the base of the skull. You can feel it right there. And you're going to come down, cutting straight down into that area. And I'm also going to make sure I've got the cape kind of up and away from underneath here. Okay, so now I see what I was looking for. If I bring the camera over, we can kind of look right down into that. You can see that's where the brainstem comes in, and that's that first vertebrae. It's nice polished joint area, and you're trying to just kind of cut all the tendons around that spot, kind of expose that joint. And then once it's to that point, you want to kind of cut the tendons around the underneath side of that area and the meat all the way back up to that joint, to the neck, both sides. And once you feel like it's pretty much free, then there's a little trick that you can do. That. Twist and pull, and voila! Your head has been removed here. Alright, so one other thing I wanted to show you real quickly before I start packing this thing up. If you remember when I first started, I cut this incision here down the back of the neck. I also cut a few little holes. These are little guide holes that tell me now that it's off the body, it's hard to figure out how much cape to leave. But if you remember, those were like 8 or 10 inches past the joint of the front leg. So I'll take the cape and lay it out like this. There's my other one. So I'm just going to imagine a line with those. And I can cut this off and not have to carry this back half of the hide out. You see how the hair just goes everywhere? That's why we do the technique we do, peel the hide back, because if you start cutting into the deer everywhere like this, you're just going to get hair everywhere on your meat. Okay, we can pack that out and not have to carry this back half of the hide. All right, that's how it's done. Hope you learned a lot.